In this showcase short, I share another of my long sought after grails, an extremely limited edition compilation of non-LP B-sides released over 40 years ago. It took me nearly 10 years to find a copy for sale, and even then I had to convince the seller, who was in another country and was not selling their copy online, to sell it to me anyway. Well, I got it, and it was worth the wait. Welcome to Collecting Elton. Hello again, friends. In this episode, I talk about a Rocket Records LP called The Other Sides. It was released in Australia only, and to make it even more exclusive, was available only for a few months. The story begins in late 1982 in Australia with a box set called the Elton John Collection. Released on the Rocket label, this box basically repackaged several Elton John albums into a box designed as a wrapped gift. There was nothing particularly special about the albums in the box. The first 7 LPs were just standard Australian copies of Elton's albums from Blue Moves up to Jump Up. But to sweeten the offering, the box included an 8th LP, a bonus album with its own sleeve called The Other Sides. This LP collected nearly all of Elton's non-LP B-sides released on Rocket up to the end of 1982. And this is what that bonus album looked like. Here it is. It's called a Special Collector's Album. And on the back, we have the track listing. So they're not in chronological order. They're sort of arranged so that they have kind of like their own sequence. And here's what the record looks like. So it's a legitimate Rocket offering. It's wonderful. And believe it or not, despite cramming about 6 tracks per side, this LP was cut very well and sounds quite good. The Other Sides wasn't the first of its kind in the Elton John catalog. In 1973, a compilation called From My Songbook had appeared in several DJM territories outside the UK and collected rare B-sides and some rare A-sides too from Elton's early 70s DJM singles. A year later, DJM released in the UK a slightly expanded version of Songbook, this time called Lady Samantha. But by the end of the 1970s, neither DJM nor Rocket had released any more collections of rare Elton tracks. So an album like The Other Sides would have seemed like a good idea at the time. It picked up almost where those 2 DJM compilations had left off. But even now, it's hard to say just how much of a blessing The Other Sides album really was. Although it was designed almost literally as a gift to collectors, it wasn't easy for collectors to get. The Elton John Collection box set was available only in Australia, and as far as I can tell, only during the 1982 Christmas season. And The Other Sides was not sold separately. You had to buy the box to get the bonus LP. So, more than 40 years later, both the Christmas box and its bonus disc are quite hard to find. Copies are so rare, in fact, that Record Collector magazine recently listed the 1982 Christmas box as one of the most difficult Elton grails to find. My interest was always just in the bonus disc, but over 10 long years of searching, I'd seen the Christmas box come up for sale only twice, and not once did I ever see The Other Sides for sale on its own. It doesn't even have its own separate entry in Discogs, so until about 2 years ago, I'd concluded that I'd probably never get a copy of The Other Sides. But then I found a copy, or rather another collector found one and kindly gave me the tip. Only problem was the store was in another country and wasn't offering their copy to online customers, not at first anyway. The store I'm referring to is The Record Collector in Bordentown, New Jersey. And the minute I learned the store's name, I went to their website and searched the catalog for The Other Sides. But while some Elton stuff turned up on the site, to my surprise, The Other Sides did not. It was in-store stock only. So, using a general query's email address, I explained to the store who I was, where I lived, and that I'd learned from a fellow collector that the store had a copy of this obscure Elton John album sitting somewhere in their bins. I said that if they were willing to sell the album to me over email, and were willing to ship to Canada, I'd be happy to pay whatever shipping rate they preferred. I sent that email to them on a Sunday, but by the following Thursday I'd received no response, so I just figured that they probably weren't interested in selling it to me. Then, late that Friday, I got a response. It was one of the happiest moments of my many years as a record collector. It had taken the store a few days, but they'd found it, and they were willing to sell it to me for sticker price and ship it to Canada. And less than 2 weeks later, it arrived here, and I finally had it in my hands. I couldn't believe it. And sometimes I still can't believe that I found it. To find the other sides for sale on its own was a 1 in a million shot, one of the luckiest breaks I've ever received as an Elton collector. For many years, very few of these non-LP B-sides were officially re-released on any format or in good sound quality. For example, in 1996, an Australian bootleg label called Mighty Fishy Records released a similar compilation, only they called theirs Flip It Over. And although Flip It Over contained some rare A-sides and several more non-LP B-sides, it was pretty much an unofficial CD version of the other sides. But it was not an official release, and playing it you could tell that all its tracks had been sourced from vinyl discs and smothered in heavy noise reduction. It sufficed in some ways, but in too many other ways it was a disappointment. Indeed, that the 12 songs on the other sides, well, that most of Elton's B-sides released after 1976 had never been officially collected anywhere, and that the majority of those had never been released in any digital format, would frustrate Elton collectors for decades. Then, a miracle. The landmark Jewel Box box set of 2020 re-released nearly all of Elton's non-LP B-sides from 1976 to 2005, including those that had previously never been released on a digital format. But this Jewel Box is one of those good news, bad news kinds of things, depending on your collecting preferences. If you're happy with CDs, you can now find all 12 of these songs, and a whole lot more, on the 8 CD version of Jewel Box. But if you're primarily a vinyl collector, I'm afraid the Jewel Box may disappoint you. Though lavish in many ways, the 9LP Jewel Box contained much less than its CD counterpart. Instead of 36 previously uncollected B-sides, the vinyl Jewel Box included only 5, and none of those had appeared on the other sides. So even in 2024, for vinyl lovers, the dream of a major Elton B-sides collection has not yet come true. If you can't find a copy of the other sides, to hear most of its songs on vinyl, you'll still have to play dusty old 45s. Here are 2 tips, though, from a seasoned collector. Tip 1. At least 8 of the 12 songs on the other sides have appeared on vinyl LPs. For example, you'll find Take Me Down to the Ocean on the 1982 Summer Lovers soundtrack LP. Tactics, Steal Away Child, and Love So Cold sound their best, in my opinion, on the 1980 French rocket Dear God 12-inch EP. An edited version of Strangers appeared on the 1982-83 rocket compilation Love Songs. Conquer the Sun and White Man Danger can both be found on the 1980 Yugoslavian version of 21 at 33. And last, the country-flavored Can't Get Over Getting Over Losing You appeared, of all places, on a 1981 K-Tel Various Artists double LP called Country Sundown. Anyway, here's tip number 2. If you must settle for a 45 copy of any of these B-sides, avoid the Rocket UK copies. Those are injection mold discs, and they sound like they were pressed on melted down toenail clippings. The Dutch Rocket copies, which nearly always had the same B-sides, were traditionally pressed 45s and generally sound good. Not great, but much better than the UK copies. Is this essential Elton? Well, I don't know if the LP itself is, but I'd say its 12 tracks are. I've never understood why so many listeners deride Elton's post-1975 material. I believe much of what came after his so-called classic period was just as strong, even if it sounded different. And specifically, his run from Single Man up to Jump Up, so 1978 to 82, a period I call his New Directions period, is one of my favorites of his entire career. And although his albums during this period weren't as consistent as they'd once been, I'll admit that, I would say his non-LP B-sides from this period were probably his best B-sides of all, many of them just as strong as their A-sides. So, if you haven't yet delved into this part of Elton's catalog, the songs on the other sides would not be a bad place to start. This has been another Collecting Elton Showcase Short. Thanks again for watching. Please click like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really helps when you do. And the more I grow my audience, the more I enjoy making content for my viewers, and there's lots more great content to come.